Greetings, Richard Fulmer here. Welcome to another edition of Richard's Rock Rambles. So today we're going to have a further look at another band that should have been bigger. And today we're going to have a look at the British band UFO, who up until about a year ago was still a going concern. And these guys started way back in London in 1968. They've featured some pretty notable musicians over the years. Especially guitar-wise. And as I say, they had been going for quite a while, but unfortunately due to illness and what have you, they've decided to call it a day. Which is quite sad because I think they're one of the bands who really got the whole new wave of British heavy metal. They sort of piggybacked that, and a lot of those bands took ideas and styles from UFO, who were essentially a great hard rock band with good songwriting, great riffs, and stellar guitar work. So, as I said, it's formed in London, 1968. The original lineup included Phil Mogg on vocals, who was there right up until the end, Mick Bolton on guitars, Pete Way on bass. Sadly died this year, about a month ago. And Andy Parker on drums. Really rock solid rhythm section there of Pete Way and Andy Parker. There were two albums with that lineup, simply called UFO 1 and UFO 2 / Flying. They were very different to what the band would go on to sound like. It was a lot more, there was a bit of blues, there was a bit of psychedelia, definitely nothing like what they would become later on. Still pretty good songs on the albums, but no great shakes. Subsequently, both of those albums didn't do much sale-wise, but as they went on with different members, you'll see how their stock rose in the rock world. There were a few other members around this time. Larry Wallace on guitar, who then, of course, went on to be one of the founding members of Motorhead. So they had some pretty notable guys within UFO. And then later on also Bernie Marsden on guitar, who of course later on went to go and join Whitesnake and became an integral part of that band, and he also wrote some great songs for Whitesnake. So they had some pretty good guys, but I don't think these guys were a stable influence within UFO. I think a lot of these guys were using UFO as a stepping stone to something else, and their style didn't really fit in with what Phil Mogg had in his vision for this band. So then we move on to 1973. And probably the biggest event for UFO was to get a certain Michael Schenker on guitar, who at the tender age of 18 joined the band. He joined from the Scorpions, which was the band that he first played in with his brother Rudolph. So this guy had so much talent, has still got so much talent. Amazing tone on his guitar. Played a Gibson Flying V, still does to this day. A lot of stage presence, quite a crazy guy, which fitted in with the rest of the guys in the band, especially people like Pete Way and Phil Mogg, who could be quite combustible on stage and off stage. These guys could party hard. So Michael fitted in like a hand in glove. It was just the right guy to get for this band. And he was also involved in the songwriting. Even though English wasn't his first language, he somehow managed that along with the music writing, the songwriting, so it was a great fit. Then further on, when he left the band and returned a couple of times, Michael. As I said, quite a volatile character. He would leave and they wouldn't know what had happened to him, and then he'd arrive for a concert tour at the last minute kind of thing. Very strange guy sometimes. They got a guy called Paul Chapman on guitars. Fortunately, he also died earlier this year. So he replaced Michael for a while. Paul Raymond, keys, keyboards, guitar, he died last year. So this band's had quite a few departures of late. Neil Carter on keyboards and guitar. Neil Carter, of course, went on to play with Gary Moore. I think he was also in a band called Wild Horses. And then at one stage they had a certain Jason Bonham on drums. I almost said John Bonham, that would have been slightly impossible. Jason Bonham on drums. Of course, he had his own band, Bonham. He's also played with Black Country Communion, amongst others. Brilliant drummer, just like his dad. Very rock solid. So I think that was a good fit for the time that he was with UFO. So these guys have done about 22 studio albums, which is not too shabby. And I would say over all the studio albums, there's probably for me about 3 or 4 that aren't fantastic, but pretty much solid right throughout their career. There have been various live albums, most notable I'm going to talk about a little later. And there have been some DVDs, including one called Showtime, which features Jason Bonham on drums and a certain Vinnie Moore on guitar, who was the last guitarist in the band. He was the last guy to join on guitar. He was with them right up until they disbanded last year. Their final studio album was called The Salentino Cuts, which was actually a covers album, which I think is the first time they'd ever done a covers album, which I found rather strange for a band who had such good songwriters and for the rest of their career had done, their own compositions. But anyway, bands sometimes want to get this out of their system, do a covers album. It usually happens towards the end of a band's career when they've maybe run out of ideas. So that was in 2017. I personally don't have all their albums, studio albums, or live. I have a fair number here, and I think I have the ones that really matter, the cream of the crop, if you like. So let me just go through what I have and talk a bit about them, show you some of the photographs inside. And so we'll start off. I don't have the first 2. I have the first one, which features Michael Schenker. This was a great album. And this is called Phenomenon. It's that one there with that strange cover with a woman with her husband throwing a hubcap into the sky. UFO, get it, supposed to be a flying object. That's the back cover there. There's, I don't know if you can see the very young Michael Schenker in the corner there. Fresh-faced 18-year-old. This album would go on to feature some of their biggest hits, notably track 3, Doctor Doctor, which is a great rock track. Excellent riff, amazing guitar work from Michael, and a track called Rock Bottom, which also was a big hit for them. And this album was actually produced by Leo Lyons, who was the bass player for none other than 10 Years After. And I think he did a pretty good job on this album. There were the ones that followed, I think, which just cemented their place in the hard rock genre. But this was a good starting point. And this is a remaster from EMI. They remastered pretty much all their albums, all the 70s albums and the 80s. And there's bonus tracks. There's about 5 bonus tracks on here, which is quite cool. So you get to hear some of the stuff that wasn't originally released on the album. And it just shows you were at this stage in their career. So that's Phenomenon. Good album. Then we move on to one called Faucet, which is a bit of a play on words, faucet. But you'll see by the cover that's not quite what they were getting at. That's that one there. And there are 9 tracks on this album. Let It Roll, that's a very good track. Shoot Shoot, these are all big hits for them. Mother Mary, which is a slightly more atmospheric, slower song with an amazing lead break from Michael. Really good album. Faucet. Then we move on to an album called, which is a really strange cover, this one, called No Heavy Petting. Not quite sure what's going on with there, but yeah, they always had an idea for the cover and that's what they went with. tracks on here that are worth checking out. Natural Thing, I'm a Loser, Highway Lady, On With The Action, that's a great track. And then there's another 5 bonus tracks on here. Let's just see if there's anything inside that I can show you as far as the photographs go. There we go, there's a picture of the band. There's a Michael in the corner there, Phil Mogg in the center, Andy Parker at the back, Pete Way. This was a really good lineup as well. And I think that was the other guy there, that was Paul Chapman. He came and went with the band for quite a few years. Solid album, no heavy petting. Right, then we go on to one of my favorite albums of theirs. This is a one which really got them a lot of attention, and it's the album called Lights Out. Too Hot to Handle, Try Me, Lights Out, the title track, which is a galloping rocker with some amazing guitar work from Michael Schenker. Getting Ready, Love to Love, which is more of a ballad type song. There's a couple of bonus tracks in here, Live at the Roundhouse from London in 1976. And there's about 4 bonus tracks on there. So this is really when they were hitting their stride, I think, with Lights Out. And the following album as well. That being Obsession, with that Hypnosis cover there, Storm Thorgerson cover, Michael in between those 2 heads. Only You Can Rock Me, Pack It Up. There's not a bad track on this album. Pack It Up and Go, Aubrey Hill, Ain't No Baby, Looking Out for Number One, Hot and Ready, which is a great rock song, Cherry, One More for the Rodeo, Born to Lose, which is another ballad, which has got a really emotive guitar break from Michael Schenker on here. You could see where this guy, he could only go up. He had so much talent. And there's 3 bonus tracks on here, produced by Ron Neverson, who's a great producer. Just want to see if there's anything worthwhile showing you in here. A couple of press clippings and what have you from what was happening at the time. There we go. There's Phil Mogg and Pete Way, the 2 party animals in the band. I think in the early days, they went out on a tour with Rush. And Rush had to learn how to party pretty quickly with these guys because I don't think they were in the same league. So Geddy Lee, Alex Lifeson and Neil Peart, that was their baptism of fire, was to go on tour with UFO. Then we go on to an album which is produced by none other than George Martin, the Beatles producer. And there's a bit of an orchestral feel to this, and I don't know if this, he's working with a band worked that well, because this is a hard rock band essentially, and he was trying to sort of give them a fuller feel, a different sort of orchestral kind of feel, and it didn't really work. There are some good tracks on here though. Letting Go is a good track, Mystery Train, Take It or Leave It. And this also featured Paul Raymond on guitar and keyboards. I think that's Paul Raymond over there. Yeah, that's him there. And that's the cover, standing at the petrol station. So yeah, it was an okay album, but it's no great shakes. It took me a couple of listens to get into this one. No Place to Run. My second favorite after Obsession is an album called The Wild, the Willing and the Innocent, and this features Neil Carter on saxophone, keyboards and guitar. To me, there's not a bad track on here. This is a strong album. Sorry, I just want to take a swig of water here. Chains, that's a really good song. Sorry, I don't know if I've shown you the cover. There we go. Somebody getting a tattoo. It's also a very strange cover. Long Gone, The Wild, the Willing and the Innocent, the title track, which is great. It's Killing Me. The best track on here is one called Making Moves, which is a full-on rocker. I mean, this one you just crank. Amazing riffs, a lot of melody. Profession of Violence, which is actually a song dedicated to the Cray brothers. gangsters, famous gangsters in the UK. Couldn't get it right. And there are 3 bonus tracks. The last one recorded live at the Marquee in London, 1980. Making Moves live, which is really good on here. So that's pretty much going through the 70s and the 80s. There was another 80s album that I have from 1982, I think this was, called Making Moves. Sorry, called Mechanics. The album is called Mechanics. Getting mixed up here. And this one also featured the same lineup as The Wild, the Willing and the Innocent, still with Neil Carter and Paul Chapman. We Belong to the Night, Let It Rain, The Writer. That's a good track. Obviously, by this stage, Michael Schenker had long gone, and a lot of fans, didn't really accept the fact that he left, and they didn't want to accept the new guys. But I think Paul Chapman and Paul Raymond and Neil Carter all added a lot to this band, especially with songwriting. Not bad guitarists at all, but obviously when you stack yourself up against a guy like Schenker, who, like Gary Moore, was just on a different level, it was always going to be hard to replace him. But still, these are good albums. Mechanics. And the last one that I have, a studio album, is one called You Are Here, which is that one there, not the greatest cover in the world. And this features a guitarist by the name of Vinnie Moore. American guitarist, very good. Also has a particular style. I think he started out with that whole sort of Mike Varney shredding period of rock. And this album also features Jason Bonham on drums. So I think he only drummed on the one. Solid album. If a bit too long, there are 12 tracks on here, and I think that if they'd made it 10, it would have been okay, because you kind of lose interest after, the 9th, 10th track. It tends to drag towards the end. Black Cold Coffee is a good track. Slipping Away. Sympathy. Not a bad album. So that's what I have as regards studio albums. And then I have probably one of the best live albums ever in the rock genre, in the hard rock genre in any case. This is an iconic live album called Strangers in the Night. Many people rate this as the best hard rock live album ever. I'd probably put it up in my top 10, along with Thin Lizzy's Live and Dangerous, Deep Purple, Made in Japan, etc., etc. This was recorded in the States, in Cleveland, in the also Amphitheater Chicago, and the Gardens in Louisville. This particular copy has a bonus track, Hot and Ready. Cherries on here, Let It Roll, Love to Love, Natural Thing. Natural Thing on here is brilliant. Only You Can Rock Me, Mother Mary, Doctor Doctor, obviously that's their biggest hit, they had to play that. Lights Out, Rock Bottom, Too Hot to Handle, and Shoot Shoot. Stunning album. Put this on, just crank it. Put it up to 10 or even 11. Upset the neighbors. They'll appreciate it. A really good live album. I think it was reissued again with a bonus disc, which I don't have, which I must endeavour to get at some stage. But a great live album. That's what live albums should sound like. And then I have an interesting box set that was released by EMI a few years back. The UFO Official Bootleg box set, featuring previously unreleased live shows, 1975 to 1982. And that's the box set there. And there's 6 discs inside. Can't really see any of that writing. Let me just show you what they look like. There's a little booklet that comes with it. There's some photographs of the band playing live. You can see Michael Schenker over there. Pete Way. And then each CD is in a box which looks like a master tape. When you're in the studio, you have those master tapes. And that's what they look like. So that's one first. That one was from 1975. Roundhouse from 1976 of Michael Schenker. Roundhouse from 77. Two of them. And it goes on. There's 6 all in all. A really nice collection to have. And well worth checking out. I think it's still in print. I'm not sure. It might. But I'm sure it should still be available somewhere on the internet. So that's worth getting, the official bootleg box set, put out, as I say, by EMI. And lastly, what I'd like to mention is a book that was released by Pete Way, the guy who passed away just recently, the bassist, called The Fast Ride Out of Here, Confessions of Rock's Most Dangerous Man. That's that book there. Interesting read. I mean, how this guy was still alive is beyond me. I mean, he did it all. And he was a great inspiration for Steve Harris from Iron Maiden. If you watch him live, you see photographs of him with his legs up on the monitor, just like Steve Harris. Steve Harris was a great lover of UFO. I think at some of Maiden's concerts, the intro tape they used before the band started playing was usually UFO. So, but a book well worth getting. And there's a couple of notes from people like Geddy Lee, Ozzy Osbourne. Let me see if I can find you that photograph with... Anyway, that's a picture of Pete Way over there. And I think there's one with Ozzy, which is quite amusing. Yes, you can see Ozzy a bit worse for wear there with Pete Way. So yeah, a book worth getting if you can find it. Fast Ride Out of Here, Pete Way. So that's it for UFO. A great English hard rock band. I mean, they didn't do a lot of fancy stuff, but they did some really good albums in the 70s and in the 80s, and even later on. Some of them that I don't have, the more recent ones, worth checking out. A band that had a particular sound, and I think when they had Michael Schenker in the band, with his tone and what have you, it set them apart from a lot of the other hard rock bands of the time. So there we go. Hope you've enjoyed that. We'll do a couple more in this sort of bands that should have been bigger, and then we're going to move on to other things. So I think the next band I'm going to cover will be that Welsh band, the power trio Budgie, and we'll take it from there. So I hope everybody has a good week, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.